Hello and welcome back to Yorkshire Talks. I'm Christine Talbot.
And I'm Matt Jameson, and we're here talking to a new generation of Yorkshire folk about their journeys and everything that they've been up to.
Yes, we're finding out exactly what makes them tick and why they love being from God's own country.
We're delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Patient.info, the UK's leading independent health information website.
Yes, with trusted, evidence-based advice written by industry professionals, Patient.info helps millions of people every month find the advice and help they need about their health and well-being.
So for reliable articles, tools and information, why not visit Patient.info?
Sometimes in life, we meet people who show us the true meaning of the words strength and courage. And today's Yorkshire Talks guest is just one of those people.
Lindsey Burrow is a mother, a campaigner and the devoted wife of the late rugby league legend, Rob Burrow.
Well, together, Lindsey and Rob captured the hearts of millions of us. They showed the world what unwavering love, courage and hope really mean after Rob was diagnosed with motor neurone disease in 2019.
Life for them and their three young children changed overnight. But instead of retreating, Lindsey stepped forward with quiet resilience and grace. She became his voice, his carer and his champion.
Well, Rob died sadly in 2024 last year, but today Lindsey continues Rob's legacy. She raises awareness, she inspires compassion, and she proves that even in loss, there is great positivity. It's an absolute honour to welcome to Yorkshire Talks our guest, Lindsey Burrow.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's now over a year since Rob died, and I think I spoke to you quite near the time Rob died, and you were still in those early months. But 1 year on, more than 1 year on, what is life like for you today, and how are you still processing what happened?
Yeah, I think we're still on that journey. You know, I think anybody that's experienced grief will know that you have your good and your bad days. And it's very much like that. You know, I'm so fortunate to have three beautiful children that keep me going, and they give me a reason to be positive. And, you know, I think the positivity that Rob showed in his battle with motor neuron disease, you know, the courage and the bravery that he showed, I think just rippled through the whole family. And I think because Rob was so positive, you know, I made that promise to Rob that we would continue to be happy. And that was Rob's last wish, was that, you know, we would continue to be happy and be happy for the children. And I know if it was the other way around, I would want Rob to be happy as well. So you do have your good and your bad days. But I think, you know, I think of Rob and I think of the bravery and the courage that he showed in the face of adversity, and that, you know, on the days where you are feeling a bit sorry for yourself or you just want to pull the duvet back over your head, I think of Rob and I think, no, I'm not going to give up. There's always somebody worse off than yourself.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I think every time we've met and when we see you out and about, you've always got a massive smile on your face. You're full of energy, full of positivity. And I think that is so infectious when people meet you as well, just to see the bravery that you've gone through, but also the impact that you're having in a positive way on everybody else.
Yeah, that's so lovely to hear. I think, you know, I'm just me at the end of the day. And I think that positivity, I always try and think I'm a glass half full kind of girl. You know, I always try to look for the positive in any situation. But I think, again, it just goes to Rob and the positivity that he showed in his battle. And, you know, his book, Too Many Reasons to Live, it was never going to give up until his very last day. And I think, you know, we've so much to be sorry.
You're okay.
I have so much to be thankful for. You know, I was Rob's wife for 17 years, and we've got three beautiful children, and they just give me a reason to be positive. And I think, you know, you have two choices. You can either go down that dark path of, you know, feeling sorry for yourself and self-pity, or you can kind of think, well, you know, it is what it is. I can't change the situation, but I'm going to make the most of each and every day. And that was kind of Rob's philosophy, I think, in life, was just to live each moment, to share the moments with the children, to spend as much time with the children, and that we just try and continue his legacy and that positivity that Rob showed the world.
Yeah. We could talk a little bit more about that and how you actually do that. How do you, because it's easier said than done, I imagine, some days, as you say, but you want to put the duvet over your head. But just take us back to meeting Rob. How did you meet, and how old were you, and what was your first thoughts about him?
Yeah, so I met Rob as a teenager. So I used to ballroom dance with Rob's sister. Rob's sister was actually my partner, and Rob had come to a presentation evening and he got my number and said, would you like to go out on a date? And the first date that I was supposed to go out with him, my mum found out that I was meeting him. And, you know, as a shy teenager, I I denied it, so I stood him up on the first time.
Oh, no.
The first day, I never turned up. So poor Rob was waiting for me, at the bus station, and I never turned up.
And that was before mobile phones and anything.
before
Yeah,
mobile phones.
couldn't message him or anything.
Rob, he'd turned up and I'd stood him up. But, fortunately, he didn't hold grudges, and that was Rob very much. He never went to bed on an argument, and he asked me out on a second date, and we did go out on that date. And yeah, the rest is pretty much history, really. Went to see Serendipity at the pictures, and Rob was such a gentleman. I remember him actually giving me his dad's coat it wasn't his dad's coat, but I thought it was Rob's dad's coat. So he got this leather jacket on. I think he was thinking he was like one of the T-Birds from
From Greece. Yeah.
Fancied himself as a bit of a Danny Zuko, but yeah, he was just such a gentleman. He was one of those, I think Rob had those family traditions instilled in him. He was very much family orientated, such a family man, and I think that comes back to his upbringing. And he was such a gentleman. He would always open the door if you walked by anyone that was swearing. He was like, you don't swear. He was very much just kind of those good manners, always making sure the children said the please and thank yous, just those good grounded kind of family traditions, really. So it was pretty much love at first sight, I think, for me, meeting Rob. And he was my childhood sweetheart. It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But Rob and I we were married for 17 years, and we were dating. At the time, I was at college doing my A-levels, so we dated throughout. I used to come home on a weekend, bring my mum my washing, had a little part-time job at Next, and then would meet up with Rob and we'd go to the cinema. Just boring, really, just enjoyed each other's company. And then he would take me back to Manchester on a weekend, so we'd spend as much time as we could together. But Rob was obviously training. He was sort of emerging into the first team at that point. So yeah, I used to go and watch him play and just spent as much time as we could together, really. So the early days, we were both very much similar. I think in many ways, very boring, didn't really like going out partying. For us, it was just about going out for a meal, just spending time,
They're
spending
the nice
time
things.
together.
They're the lovely things to do.
Pajamas and just watching a film. And
Yeah.
That's so nice. That's so sweet.
But Mum and Dad obviously came round to him, even though Mum wasn't too happy about the first date. But it wasn't exactly what Dad prescribed, because you're quite a small family, aren't you?
Yes.
What was it your dad had always said about who you ended up with?
So my dad had always said, Lindsey, whatever you do, just marry somebody with height so we can get some tall genes in the family. And then obviously I turned up with Rob, but probably couldn't have picked anyone, smaller than Rob. Was probably 5'4". But yeah, I think my dad, what Rob lacked in stature, he definitely made up in heart and personality. And I always think if I was, Macy and Mayo's dad and they brought someone home like Rob, I think, my dad, he was like a son to my dad.
Well, that's so lovely.
That's so lovely. So life was pretty good. You got married. You'd got 3 very small children.
Yes.
And Rob's career was brilliant. I mean, he must have been wonderful to watch him play. I mean, the speed. Rob was known for those. He could run from one end of the pitch to the other, couldn't he, in no time at all. What was it like watching him and seeing his success?
Yeah, I mean, I think we often forget, Rob, there's the rugby player and the incredible achievements that he had. It's just incredible when you look at what he achieved. And Rob always says, I was just a lad from Yorkshire that had a dream of playing rugby. And I think what he went on to achieve in the game is just incredible. For me,
I'll just sum it up, because he made 500 appearances, almost for the Leeds Rhinos, but also played for England and Great Britain, which is incredible. I mean, he got to the top, didn't he?
Yeah, I feel really bad now. I feel like a bad wife. I should know those statistics. Thank you, Christine. Thank you for those. He did. He made it to the top, and he faced adversity. Growing up, he was told that he was too small. He was never going to make it as a rugby player. And I think that was probably paralleled in his battle with motor neuron disease, having been told that you were never going to be a rugby player because you was too small, and then being told that you've got a year to 2 years to live. Rob was determined to prove them wrong. And I think for me, watching Rob, being a physiotherapist, I always had in the back of my mind, injuries, and you just never know what's around the corner in sport. You can be high and then low, and being through that, the good and the bad with Rob throughout his career. Rob was quite fortunate. He didn't suffer too many injuries throughout his career, but there were niggles, and particularly towards the end. But I was just always thankful when he came off the pitch at the end and he was in one piece, a bit battered and a bit bruised, a bit sore the next day. But yeah, I was just glad to see him walk off the pitch. And to me, a good game was if he scored a try, but he'd tell me, no, it's not about scoring tries. It's about the teamwork and about the tackles goals and the plays. But yeah, he was just an incredible player and such a team player as well. There was times in his career where he was dropped to the bench, and he never felt sorry for himself. He was always just glad to be part of the team, and that's really incredible. And I think that's just Rob in a nutshell.
You must have been so proud, just so proud of everything that he achieved. And that teamwork, I think, is so important, isn't it? When in any kind of genre in life. And like you said, that's passed on to your kids as well. And you've got such a tight...
He didn't seem to have an ego, did he? Which is what you're saying there. So he was very happy to be part of a team, not necessarily just be the star of the team.
Yeah.
And you don't always get that with the sports.
No, Rob was very down to earth. There was never any ego with him. He would always make time for the fans to sign autographs. Do player appearances. There was never. He would do anything for anyone. Would Rob? So yeah, I feel incredibly proud to have been Rob's wife, to have been to be the mother of his 3 children, and we had so many special times and so many special memories, and I'm forever grateful for that.
What was the point at which you realised that something was wrong? When did you realise that Rob had something? You obviously didn't think what it would be, but what were the signs?
Yeah, so the early signs were Rob's speech. So he started sort of slowing his speech. And I remember he was doing a presentation. So once Rob had finished his playing career, he then went into coaching at the Leeds Rhinos. And he was doing a presentation, the end of year presentation, and presenting one of the awards. And he was having difficulty articulating certain words. And remember at the time, actually, we were moving house and Rob couldn't say the word solicitor. So he was having difficulty articulating words. And I think people started to question whether Rob was drinking, whether he was doing something that, perhaps he shouldn't be doing. And, for the record, Rob wasn't a drinker. Very rare did you see Rob, if there was a team social, Rob would be always the first one out the back door. And I always felt guilty for that. I always used to think, gosh, his teammates must used to think I'm at home saying, Rob, you must come home now. And actually it was the opposite. I was the one that was saying, go out, enjoy yourself. It's such a short career, enjoy it, make the most of it. And I think, like you say, the team and it's so important, and the camaraderie that they had. So yeah, it was a speech, I think, initially, and Rob, having played rugby, had had a number of head injuries in his career. So he mentioned it to the Leeds Rhinos doctor at the time, and they quite quickly referred him to see a neurologist. Right. So Rob was diagnosed really quickly, actually. So a lot of people with MND often get misdiagnosed, and it's a difficult diagnosis because it's just eliminate other diagnoses, and it's not like if you're testing for diabetes, you can have a test that tests your blood sugar. This is a test, it's kind of eliminating all the other things. And for me, what I'd noticed, that Rob had tremors called fasciculations in his arms, but other than that, he was well. He was still coaching, he was still doing the school run, just doing the ordinary things that you and I would ordinarily do. So in himself, he felt well. He was referred to see the neurologist and had a battery of tests, so had MRI scans, had some blood tests done, and everything had come back clear, had come back as normal. And then he was referred to have some nerve conduction studies done, and it was the nerve conduction studies that showed abnormalities that ultimately led to the diagnosis of motor neuron disease. So we received the diagnosis back in December 2019. It was just 3 days before Jackson's first birthday party. And I think, you Google the signs, and obviously working within the NHS, you have, is this? But we were quite hopeful going into that appointment that the condition we thought Rob might have had is myasthenia gravis, which is a condition that affects your speech muscles, but it's treatable. So we went into that appointment thinking this will be okay. Rob will get some medication, life will continue. Life was pretty perfect at that point.
Yeah.
And obviously that wasn't the case.
How did that feel then at that moment when that diagnosis came?
Heartbreaking. I think for me, as a physiotherapist working within the NHS, I had some insight to the journey that lay ahead. I'd seen patients with motor neuron disease, had treated them, as a junior physiotherapist back on the respiratory wards. And I knew it was probably the one disease. I think if you ask any medical person, it's the one disease that they would say they didn't want to get.
Yeah.
Whereas Rob was very much more positive. He was, the first thing actually that Rob said to me was, thank goodness it was him and not me or the children.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And he was more bothered about his dad and, telling the family, and obviously they were waiting at home. They knew we'd gone to the appointment. So, it was all those things of how are you going to tell the children, how are you going to tell Rob's parents? it was just, heartbreaking. And I just wanted to get out the room. We'd obviously been in to see the consultant. We were offered, do you want to stay and speak to a nurse? And I just wanted to get home. I just wanted to get home back to the children. But Rob was, in true Rob style, was very positive. It'll be okay. We'll be okay. His first thought was for me and the children.
Yeah.
And life was so perfect up to that point, and suddenly life looked very different, just in one second.
Mm-hmm.
And that must have been very hard to deal with. Suddenly you had an idea of what the future held. Maybe Rob didn't as much. And that must have been very hard for you.
It was. And I think having that insight definitely didn't help initially. I think it helped later on. But I think initially, it was simple things. I go to the cash machine. I couldn't remember my PIN number. I would break down. I would just be in the middle of town and just burst into tears, and just not sleeping and loss of appetite. It was really difficult. Those first couple of weeks were really difficult, just to get your head around that this was happening, and how are we going to tell the children? It was just before Christmas, just before Jackson's first birthday. Those conversations are really difficult, and nobody prepares you. Nobody expects to have to tell the children that the dad's got a life-limiting illness, and he's not going to be around as long as we wanted him to be. So that was really difficult.
Did they know at that stage that was the case?
No, I think because we didn't have a lot of the answers. We'd received the diagnosis, and I think the shock, and what we're going to do now. And I had a phone call the next day with one of the MND nurses, and it was just, how do I tell the children? What do I tell the children? And her advice to me was, be honest with the children. Don't say that Daddy's going to get better, but that the doctors and the nurses are doing everything they can for Daddy, and that's kind of the route that we went down. And we've always stood by being honest with the children and telling them exactly what they need to know. But as a parent, that's really hard, because you just want to protect your children. You don't want to see them going through tough times and adversities, particularly at such a young age. Jackson was 1 at the time, Maya was 4, Macy was 7. They were so young. And Rob idolised the children. He was such a family man. He would rush home from training to spend time with the children. In fact, I had a friend that actually said, I thought Rob was a single parent, because he was the one that, would do the school run, he would do the pickup, because I'd be at work, and he was just so hands-on with the children. So knowing what such a good dad he was really hard, and knowing that he was going to be taken away. And it's really difficult, I think, when you think of, the future, and you think of, the girls, him not walking them down the aisle, and that's really the heart breaking thing. And the emotional part for me is always the children, and not having the dad, because he was such a good dad.
Particularly Jackson would never have known Rob any different, because at most of Jackson's life, he was only not even one when he was diagnosed. So he wouldn't remember what life was like before.
Yeah, I think all Jackson's memories now of Rob, being in a position where he needed help. He couldn't walk, he lost the ability to talk, he had to communicate with us through a special technology device, an eye gaze machine. And we're fortunate in many ways, because we've got a lot of footage of Rob playing, and there's so much kind of archives of his playing career, and we'll often watch that. Or we'll say, Rob Jackson, do you remember when Daddy scored the 2011 grand final try, and things like that. So it's just trying to keep his memory alive, and remember Rob as Rob the rugby player, and Rob the dad, as much as it was Rob with MND. So Jackson pretty much knew his dad for being needing help, and not being able to play with him, not being able to do the things that dads and Rob would have wanted to do. I think that was the hardest part for me, was knowing that simple things like being able to read the children a bedtime story, or kick a ball around with Jackson in the garden, throw a rugby ball, take him to his rugby game. As much as Rob would have wanted to do that, those things had been taken away from him, and that for me, that was the hard part. That was the emotional part.
I think it's incredible that you've got that footage, like you just said. That I hadn't even thought about that, but having all that to be able to show the kids as they're getting older, and show what an incredible sports person Rob was, and the legacy that he left in the rugby world, but then also leading on to this incredible legacy that you're now doing in Rob's memory, which is absolutely incredible.
Absolutely. I've always been proud of Rob, proud of Rob as a rugby player, but I think even more so for the work that he's done around the MND community, around raising awareness. Over £20 million has been raised for MND charities because of the work that, Rob and Kevin Sinfield and, has done. So it's just incredible to think,
It's
the positive
amazing.
effect it's had and the legacy that Rob leaves is really special.
I was thinking, whenever I see your girls, Macy and Maya, and I almost look at did they have to adapt and grow up quickly, particularly Macy? I feel like sometimes she's your little right-hand woman, isn't she? She always seems very caring and very protective of you. Those scenes I remember when Robert died and you were looking at all the tributes and you were very emotional, not surprisingly. But I remember she had her arm around you looking after her mum. And have they been a support to you in that way, even though they were only so young?
Unbelievable. They've supported me more than they will ever know. And I think, like you say, Macy is so kind and just so caring, as is Maya and, Jackson. They're all really, I think that's really important, that they're kind and caring. And as a parent, that's all I would ever want them to be, to be kind and caring, considerate, to treat people as they would want to be treated themselves. And they are so kind and caring. And I often worry about the children. I worry about Macy because I think she does try to protect me, and I think she would probably not show her emotions because she wouldn't want to upset me. But I think through this journey I've learned that it's okay not to be okay, and actually to show the children that you're sad or you're having a bad day. And I will often say now, well, this song came on the radio and that reminded me of Daddy and I felt sad, and it's just allowing them to say, oh, I felt sad today because this has happened. Or so I think that's a big thing for me, because I think, like you say, the positivity is so important. And making the most of each and every day and living life to its fullest is what I try, is my mantra, is that how I try and live my life. But I'm human at the end of the day, and I do have my bad days, and it's okay to have those days. And I think be honest with the children, and we have a little memory box at home where we put memories in of Rob, and we'll often, our favourite memories or certain times. And we did a lot publicly. I think it was also really important. We had those private moments as well, and we'd done some little castings with the children with the hands, and Rob left messages. So it's just they've been such a support, have the children, and I just feel incredibly proud to be the mum, and to go on and see, I can't wait to see what they go on and achieve in life.
Well, I think they're going to be pretty incredible children.
Yeah, definitely.
You just talked there about, you did a lot publicly, but you also, why did you decide to do this in public? Because that mustn't have made life any easier. You'd got all this to deal with, and we recently saw Lewis Moody, another rugby player who's also just been, you can tell he's trying to process the whole thing, and I suspect that took you back to that. So you're at that decision why did you go public, and why did you were selfless. I'm having trouble with that word today. You were selfless in that you went out there, you went to all those events, despite how poorly Rob must have been feeling, and you probably didn't feel like it doing all the time. Why? What was behind it?
Do I have to be completely honest, it really surprised me that Rob went public, because Rob was such a private family man. And I think for him to open his doors at a time when he was at his most vulnerable was such a brave and courageous thing to do. And I always remember when Rob did his first ever interview with Tanya Arnold, where it was announced that Rob had been diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And at the end of the interview, Tanya had said, do you think your wife Lindsey will do an interview? And Rob said, no way. There's no way on this earth that you'll get Lindsey doing an interview. And here I am now. But I think it was the outpouring of love and support, and knowing that you were making a difference. And that was the important thing for me. It was about making a difference. And I and Rob felt that if sharing our story helped one other person or one other family that was going through a difficult time, then that was enough reason to share our story. And I think the awareness that's been raised because of Rob sharing his story, people now come into the clinic and say, I think I've got the Rob Burrow disease. And so to have that effect, you know, and for people to bring it home into people's living rooms, to keep it at the forefront of people's mind because of the work that Rob's done, and the late Doddy Weir and Ed Darby, Stephen Darby, all those people that have kind of raised the profile of MND. I remember when Rob was first diagnosed, and my friend, he actually told my friend at Jackson's first birthday party, and she was like, "Oh, Rob, I'm sorry to hear the news." And she said it wasn't until on the way home we had to pull over and stop the car, because she said, "I didn't realize, I had no idea what MND was." She said, "I just thought it was a condition that, oh, you'll be okay."
Yeah.
It's,
I
and
think so.
real. I knew had an idea, but I did not know the consequences of it,
Yeah,
and what it's like to live with it, until
yes,
Rob raised that profile by being so courageous and putting himself out there, and everybody does now understand.
And it just made it so public, didn't it? And just thinking back as well, it made it onto Coronation Street.
It did, yeah.
So they picked, because of Rob being open and you as a family being open about your journey, that got the Coronation Street lot, didn't it? Thinking about it and actually putting it right out there in the public
bring it
forum.
home to people's living rooms, doesn't it? And I think for me, I've had people say to me, we don't have to explain what MND is now because of Rob and because he's shared his story. We don't have to explain that. And that's a really important thing for me, because I think families with MND would often shy away. People would stop visiting, people wouldn't come and see them, because people don't know what to say. But I think now people have an awareness. We've seen with the challenges that Kevin does, people come out of the houses to see Kevin. It brings that whole MND community together, and it's such a beautiful community. It's incredibly proud. There's some beautiful people, and they've always got smiles on their faces. They just, they amaze me how, wonderful that community is. It's not a community anyone wants to be part of, but it's such a special community.
And we're only weeks away, as we record this podcast, from the opening of the Rob Burrow Centre, which is going to be doing a lot of research into the disease, which was much needed research, really, wasn't it? And possibly, maybe one day, find a cure. And that's down to Rob raising that awareness and all the money that he has helped to raise over the years, the 20 million.
Yeah, it's just incredible, to think this. It's taken 5 years, but that was just a pipeline dream. We had that conversation with Dr. Jung, Rob's neurologist, about having a centre in Rob's name, the Rob Burrow MND Centre, and public generosity and kindness raised the target of £6.8 million back in December last year. They've continued to raise a further £1.5 million, which is going into research. They're currently doing 2 research trials looking at early diagnosis in Leeds, and just having a nice space where people can go. Nobody wants to go into hospital, nobody looks forward to it, but just having a centre that is dedicated to the MND community, to patients, to families, and a safe place where you can go and will make such a difference.
Yeah.
The whole family has just completely got behind it as well, like with Rob's sisters as well, and the activities and events. I took part in the Strictly Dancing event last year, which was absolutely incredible. But the support that you get from everybody to support this legacy is just amazing. And as you've just been saying about the centre opening, it's pioneering.
The difference it's going to make, and it's a lasting legacy to Rob that is just fun. I mean, you must be so proud when you went on that day when you took that ribbon. Gosh,
I think Rob's no-tear policy will be broken on that day.
It's going to be so emotional, I think, for you, for everybody that's been involved in that
for
journey.
Me and for Rob as well. I know I speak on behalf of Rob. To help other families and to see the difference that it will make to so many other families. That's why we did it. That was why we wanted to bring hope to families and to have a centre that's dedicated in Rob's name. It's a place where we can go and remember Rob and to celebrate his amazing legacy and everything that he's achieved. So it'll be really special and really excited.
Yeah,
for it to open.
We talked just now about Lewis Moody, another high-profile rugby player, just recently diagnosed, clearly still coming to terms with it. Have you spoken to him, or has he reached out to you in any way, and does what he's going through now make you remember everything that you were going through at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, my thoughts are with Lewis and his family. And, if there's anything that I can do to support the family, then, they know where I am. It's a really tough time. I've been there, and I think just processing the information and trying to get your head around it and what life's going to look like. It's a difficult time. It's a really difficult time for the family. And, when I heard the news, it does bring back lots of memories, seeing Lewis's interview. It does bring it home, and obviously having been through there, you've kind of walked in the shoes and you know what path lies ahead. But I'm sure the rugby league, the rugby union community, like the rugby league community have done, will get behind and support Lewis. in his battle with MND.
You've taught because you wrote your own memoir about the whole journey, which came out earlier this year.
Yes.
Take Care,
Yes.
which was also talking about the life of being a carer. But one of the things that struck me was one of the few times you and Rob actually had a bit of a tiff was because you asked how long he had,
Yes.
and he didn't want. He was a bit cross with you for doing that, wasn't he? What happened there?
Yeah, I think for me, I was always the organised, practical one. I'm the always one that had the to-do list. Rob was always on time. I was always late. I was the organised one. Rob was the disorganised one. So we kind of, we worked together as a team. But for me, it was important because I needed to prepare the children. I needed to know, that's just me as a person. I like to be organised. I like to have everything. Whereas Rob kind of just lived each day as it came. And in hindsight, I think that's probably a good thing, that you just take each day as it comes. But I just felt that I needed to be prepared as much as you could possibly be. So that was really important to me. And I did ask the question, and Rob was quite upset with me afterwards, and I felt like the worst person in the world, because the last thing, I never had the intention of upsetting Rob. And I think Rob knew that deep down, but he was just wanted to live each day to its fullest, and he just didn't really think too much about the future. So I never asked the question again. And we were just grateful to have Rob here. Every day, every Christmas, every birthday was a bonus. But yeah, that was a really difficult time. But I didn't do it, never would I have done it to upset Rob. It was just that person in me that wanted to be practical, that wanted to know how much time we had left. And, in hindsight, they were never going to be able to give me an exact answer, and knowing Rob's fight and his determination, he was always going to prove them wrong anyway. But that was my reason for asking that question.
But it does highlight the life that you were having. I mean, you were asking that question probably partly, as you say, you were trying to work. You're a physiotherapist.
Yes.
You're a mum of 3. You had a lot of things to juggle, as well as being Rob's carer. So, and one of the things you've written about in your book is you saw it firsthand how hard that life is when you're trying to juggle so many things without a lot of support. I know you've got great family support, but what other did you get? Did you feel that there should be more out there for people in your position?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the work, and ultimately I did the book Take Care, was to really shine a light on the work that carers do. And I think seeing what carers do for our country, and how they care for people, the love, and they don't do it for rewards or accolades, they do it genuinely because they care, and seeing that. And I really wanted to kind of shine a light on the work that carers do. Sorry, Christine, I've forgot what
no, it's just
off there.
how difficult life is for a carer, and how did you manage it really with having still having to be a mum, all the things that children have going on?
I think I was so fortunate because I had the support of my employer, the NHS, which allowed me to work from home and to care for Rob, because that was important to me, that, I was still able to bring an income. I think thinking back, Rob was diagnosed in December 2019. In the March, we went into lockdown. So everything at work, we weren't doing the face-to-face clinics. Everything went remotely, which meant that I could be at home and I could look after Rob. And at that point in time, Rob was still pretty independent. We were still going out coaching, and then obviously lockdown hit, and he wasn't able to go out. He wasn't, doing the things that we did. Remember the times where we were only allowed an hour, in the garden, or doing the exercises, and thinking to those times, queuing at the supermarket for your milk and your pasta and your eggs. And it was just, in hindsight, I think that was a really lovely time for us as a family, because it meant we weren't rushing out to after school clubs. We weren't dashing around. I'm sure many parents will say life is so busy, but actually having that time where it was just, the 5 of us as a family, family quizzes on Zoom, and just, it was an isolating time, but I think a time where we actually got that quality time together, whereas I think because otherwise we would have been here, there and everywhere, and out and about. So it was, in hindsight, I think, every cloud has a silver lining, and to have that time together during that COVID time was really special. And I was just so fortunate to be able to look after Rob and continue to work. And I was so fortunate because I got the support of my family and, Rob's parents as well, who helped with the children. And we just tried to keep life as normal as possible by the children still going to the clubs and doing everything. And we were just so fortunate to have that support, but I'm aware that not everybody does have that support. network.
Yeah, and that's what you wanted to highlight, because so many people take on that responsibility
Yes.
on their own and don't have. Did you have outside help as well? Did Rob have anybody else coming in, or was it just yourself?
No, I think I'm quite stubborn, true Yorkshire girl, that I like to, I find it difficult to ask for help, I think, is probably my downfall. I like to do everything. I like to be, Miss Independent.
Yeah. You were carrying, we saw the amazing documentary that was made about your life, which should have won a national television
it should have won. We
award.
were all voting. We were all voting for it.
I know, we all voted.
Campaign to get people voting.
I know. No, it was great. It was great.
Such an insight into what life was like for you, where you became very physically dependent on you as well, and that so that your role, you were as a wife, changed completely, didn't it, into being a carer. Did Rob find that difficult?
I think Rob was just happy. I remember Rob doing an interview and he said something along the lines of, it's beautiful being cared by the only person that you've ever loved. And I think Rob was just so grateful, so appreciative that, the things that not just me, but his mum and dad. And, because when somebody's poorly, it doesn't just affect the person that's poorly, it affects the whole family.
Yeah.
And I think he was just so grateful that people had put their lives on hold to look after Rob. But I know he would have done the same had it been the other way round.
Yeah.
So I think Rob accepted it really well. And I look back now and I think, I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he stayed so positive. And, it's just incredible to think, the positivity that he showed, knowing that his life was going to be cut short, knowing that simple things that you and I take for granted, like being able to scratch our nose, make yourself a drink, personal cares, he couldn't do any of those things. And yet he never moaned. He never once said, why me? He never had any self-pity. And to do that is just incredible. It's just, I don't know how he did it.
It really is.
He was. And I always think one of the things you always remember about Rob, he always had a big smile, no matter what everything else was taken away from him. His smile never was it?
I think he used to annoy quite many of the players because he would always come in happy. When they were training at 6 o'clock in the morning, he'd have had his 4 espressos, he'd have had his kind of Red Bull, he'd have had his 2 cans of Coke.
Wow,
So
he was ready. He was ready.
And I think he used to annoy some of the big, players that would come in a bit grumpy and, tired. And Rob was always so full of life and always so positive. And, I think annoying probably is the word that his teammates would describe. I think the amount of times he was in, the chokehold and nearly, had to fight for his life against
but still smiling.
To practice, but still smiling.
Still smiling.
And that smile was there to the very end, wasn't it? When he'd see him out on an event and he'd say hi, and he always had a big smile, no matter, what was happening, really.
In the documentary, and Rob left a final message of hope. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we pre-recorded the documentary knowing that this was going to be the last documentary.
What's the name? It's one Rob Burrow, isn't it?
There's only one Rob Burrow.
And you can see it on iPlayer at the moment,
So it was recorded. Rob knew it was going to be shown after, and we got the privilege of seeing the documentary.
Wow.
We got to sit in the edit suites at the BBC and kind of watch the video. So we knew that this was going to go out after Rob had passed. It was just his final message, to the world, to say, whatever your personal battle, be brave and face it. And that was his, his final message to everyone. And I think it just, the messages he left about in a world full of adversity, must dare to dream, because of his positivity. And that was just his way of signing out. And, at the end of the documentary, it says Rob Burrow over and out. And I said to him, you can't say that. But that was just Rob's way. That was his humour. That was his, his way of saying, this is my legacy and this is, this is what I leave behind.
What was that like, listening to that when you watched that documentary with him? How did you feel?
Oh, I was in complete tears. I was, really hard. I think because it was like a montage of events and seeing, the journey that we'd been on, and from the early diagnosis right up until, that last recorded message that we recorded at Headingley, in the changing rooms, and knowing that was going to go out and potentially be seen by, millions of people after Rob had passed. It was upsetting, but in a nice way, because it was Rob's way of leaving his mark on the world, and he had his final say.
And it did, and that continues to this day.
In your book, you talk about the difficult moment when Rob passed away, and almost you talk about he let you know in his own eyes that he was ready.
Yes.
What was that like? How did that come about? Because he became quite poorly and was taken
Yes.
into hospital, wasn't he?
Yeah. So Rob was taken into hospital with pneumonia, and became very poorly. And I think it was soon quite apparent that he probably wasn't going to come out of hospital. And I was Rob's advocacy, and it was really hard to have that conversation about whether Rob wanted to carry on. I talk about it in the book, how I felt enormous guilt because I was the one that had to ask that question. Rob, do you want to carry on? Have you had enough? We knew he was doing it tough. He didn't want his Red Bull. He didn't want his Coke, and that wasn't Rob. He didn't want physio. He didn't want any intervention. And when you care for someone, you don't want to see them suffering.
No.
And he'd fought his battle, and it was time. But I felt so guilty that I'd had to ask Rob that question, and I felt, should I have said, Rob, carry on, please carry on. But I knew that Rob was finding it increasingly hard. He'd had so much taken away from him, and seeing him so acutely unwell, it just wasn't fair. And I remember sitting out of the room and talking to one of the nurses, and she said, you've done you couldn't have done any more, it's time, basically. And we were so fortunate because we had that time together as a family. So the night before Rob passed, the children came and we made little memory things with the children. We got to, we painted Rob's hand and did little fingerprints with them, and we slept in the room with him. The children thought they were on a little holiday. They got to sleep in the visitors' room at the hospital, but it meant that Rob was surrounded by the people that he loved most and who loved him the most at the end. And he went really peacefully, and that's a real comfort to me, knowing that he wasn't in pain, he wasn't suffering, and he was surrounded by love at the end of the day. And he brought so much love into our lives, and it was a really difficult time, but I take comfort knowing that he wasn't suffering anymore. He wasn't in pain.
And he told you with his eyes, you said, are you ready? And he looked at, it's the way he looked at you that you knew.
So we used to communicate with him by saying, look left if it's a yes, look right if it's a no. And, when he asked the question, have you had enough? And he said, look to the left. And then it was just a case of, are you sure, Rob? Look to the left again if it's a yes. And he did. And, it was time.
Oh, Lindsey, gosh. Making you go through this and again, but I think it is important that people understand the experience that you've actually been through, and what would you say to yourself now, having been through all this? And one of the things that you do say is that Rob had actually said to you he wouldn't change a thing, which is an incredible thing to say. Why do you think he said that?
I asked Rob the question, if playing rugby has contributed to you getting M&D, if, lifestyle, whatever. And he said, no, absolutely not, Lindsey. He said, I've got 3 beautiful children. I married the girl, my teenage sweetheart. I've travelled the world with rugby. I've got the best group of friends through playing for the Rhinos. And, we only have to look at, what they've done for Rob and the camaraderie and the bond. And he just said, I wouldn't change anything. And I think he achieved so much in his, he was 42 when he passed, which is very young. But I think what he achieved, people can only dream of achieving those things. And that for him, he was in a good place. And he just lived life to the full. He'd done everything that he wanted to do. He got 3 beautiful. That's the hard part that is not here to see the children grow up. We know without any shadow of a doubt. But he had achieved so much in his rugby career, in his life. He'd travelled the world. He'd had so many great experiences, and he was just so thankful for the opportunities that he'd had. And he'd supported Leeds growing up. His dad had taken him to see his first Leeds game, and it was actually interesting. The first game after Rob had passed was Hull, that Leeds played, Hull away, and that was Rob's first ever game that he played was against Hull away. And then the second game, which was the Lee game, Lee was the first team that his dad had taken him to see, because Rob couldn't decide if it was Lee or Leeds that he was cheering for at that point. So yeah, just, I think certain things that happen that you just think, I think he still is with us in spirits.
Yeah.
I hope he's with us. And,
Well,
I hope he's looking down on us.
Jackson is his mini me, isn't he? He is the absolute double. And I also saw him racing around at the Children of Courage Awards, like Rob on the pitch. He's very much like him, isn't he?
He's very much like Rob. I don't think he's going to follow in his dad's footsteps. He's quite a sensitive little soul, is Jackson. He has started playing rugby and football, but I don't quite think he's got that grit, should I say, that Rob had. That he's quite shy, and he will often at training he'll bring me a flower rather than do the training. Or I think actually should be the cheerleader on the pitch.
Bless him.
Who knows? As long as he enjoys it, that's 100% the main thing.
And how about Macy and May? How are they doing now? A certain amount of time has passed and they seem very busy. They're doing all sorts of things, aren't they? Yeah,
they certainly keep me busy. Macy's currently doing panto. May has just been doing some filming. So they're very active, and I think that's what Rob wanted. He wanted them to live happy, childhood and to go on and do what they want to do in life. And I think as a parent, as long as your children are happy, whatever they do, we'll support them in any way that we can.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
One of the things I was going to pick up on what you were saying about whether rugby had contributed, and I know that a lot of research is going on now, isn't it, into hard sports injuries and whether that has in some, because there does seem to be quite a number of sports players who seem to be developing neurological conditions. Is that one of the things that the new centre's going to be looking at?
Initially, it's looking at early diagnosis research trials that they're doing at the moment, but potentially that's something that they will look at. I think it's really difficult, and I think MND is such a complex disease at a cellular level.
Because it can be partly genetic one, can't it, as well?
Yes, yeah. So Rob was tested for the genetic form of it, and for Rob, there was no family history of it. He didn't test positive. It was just a sporadic. But I think my understanding is that it's probably a combination of different factors that led to it. Rob's take on it was just bad luck, and he was one of those people, but that was diagnosed, unfortunately. But I think it's really difficult because you've got people that never play sport that get MND. So we definitely need more research and into the the causes. Why do people get MND?
It could just be that because the players are high profile, is getting attention because they're high profile, whereas a lot of people, as you say, have never played a tough sport like rugby are getting it, and you don't hear about it as much. So you've been doing lots of challenges. I mean, you've never stopped. You're still out there and doing marathons and all sorts of difficult challenges, difficult runs, but you're also doing a 3-legged walk with Amy Garcia next week, I think, or the week after. But by the time this podcast goes out, you'll have done it already. But what's actually happening and how you're looking forward to it? What training are you doing?
I know. How do you train for a 3-legged event? Talk us through that. Sounds very interesting.
We're doing 3 counties on 3 legs. So I think we're looking around the 30-mile mark. So probably 15 miles. We're doing it over 2 days. So we will be strapped together.
15 miles in one day.
15 miles in one day.
That is a lot.
On 3 legs. Yes, it's going to be a challenge. I've never done anything like this before. I think the hardest part is going to be trying to keep in sync. And Amy's got quite long legs. Again, already I've got quite short legs. So I think actually just keeping up with each other and kind of syncing. We've had a little bit of a practice. We've had a bit of a training run. We work great, but...
How far did you do? How far did you do in the training?
Oh, not very far, to be fair. So we'll see how it goes, but I think it's having that Yorkshire grit, isn't it, and that determination. And
exactly.
I think it's when you sign up to do something and knowing that you're raising money for a good cause to help children. And we actually went last week to visit one of the centres that children in need support, and seeing the incredible work that they do. So it's just a great privilege and honour to be invited. And
That's brilliant.
I know there'll be tough challenges across the way, but I think anything that challenges you, is not a bad thing.
Fingers crossed for good weather.
We'll be
for it as well. Let's
I just to put up with me for 2 days.
Oh, you'll have a blast. You'll have a blast. What else have you got? What else have you got in the pipeline then? What else is coming up for you? Obviously, the centre's going to be opening imminently. What else have you got going on?
Do you know, I think at the moment, I think the centre's the big thing, and the opening and the work that's gone into the centre is the biggest thing. But I think for me, it's just seeing what opportunities come along, and the children are always going to be my priority. First and foremost, whatever they need me as their mum, they're my priority.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying my job. But I work part time as a physiotherapist within the NHS, so being able to spend a bit more time, on my own professional development, I think, and my career is important. The children are still very young. Jackson's only 6, and the girls, Mason's at high school. May will start high school in September, so they keep me busy. If it's not a taxi service or
well, Mason's doing a run, isn't she? She's going to be on stage a lot of the next couple of months, isn't she? So she does keep you busy. Now, what we always ask our guests is to bring in 2 things. One, which says Yorkshire to them, and the other, which is something very special to them. So what have you brought in that says Yorkshire to you?
Go, some Yorkshire puddings.
Oh,
Perfect.
Love it. I love it.
I was racking my brains as to what do I bring, and I just thought, it's a food symbol, isn't it? And it's, no Sunday dinner is complete without good old Yorkshire puddings.
And do you buy them ready-made? Because I do.
Yeah, I do. I thought you
make them yourselves.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Those M&S ones are very good.
They are the best thing. They are the best thing.
No Sunday dinner is complete without Yorkshire puddings. And I think my children would just have a plate of Yorkshire puddings and gravy if they could.
That was my favourite. My favourite when I was a kid, just the Yorkshire puddings. But have you ever had them as a sweet, as a dessert, where you put like treacle and strawberries and stuff on?
A bit like a pancake.
Yeah, but and you fill it with all sweet treats.
No.
You'll have to do it for the kids.
Yeah, I'll have to try that one. So
I've
that was my
where Yorkshire puddings came from and why they're called Yorkshire puddings. We'll have to do some research into that. But that's a very good thing to say, Yorkshire. Very, very good.
I was racking my brains because I think, typically it's Yorkshire tea, isn't it? When you think of Yorkshire, you think of somebody with a brew, and but I thought, Yorkshire's in the title, and it's part
and that's tea sorted for tonight as well. And what's the thing that's very special to you, Lindsey?
My book, Take Care. And this is certainly not a plug for the book, but this is me, and this is, it's about never giving up. The title says a memoir of family love and never giving up. And it's about my childhood growing up. I was born in the 1980s. My dad and my grandfathers were both miners, so I grew up in the miners' strike. And it's about my childhood and obviously meeting Rob, our life together. And then obviously, the diagnosis right up until Rob's final days. And so I thought, I brought this because I think this took real courage to write this book. And when I was approached initially and they said, would you like to write a book? We've got interest. And I said, oh, it's not for me. Who am I to write a book? Nobody's going to be interested in buying my book. But I feel incredibly proud. I think it took some real courage to write this. I've been very honest and open in the book and probably set myself up to be quite vulnerable. But I think it's a true story, and the feedback that I've had, that people have said they've read the book and it's helped them, in difficult times. That's exactly why I wanted to do the book. So I feel really lucky and proud to have had the opportunity to write the book. So that was
and be forward by a very special VIP,
Yes.
Prince William. That's amazing.
Yeah, just incredible. We'd met Prince William at Headingley when Rob and Kevin were awarded their CBEs, and we'd approached him, and I never thought in a million years he would write the foreword for my book, but he agreed. And to have his words in there is really special.
That's incredible, and what a legacy as well to have that published and share that story and give so many people hope.
And wonderful
and positivity
for your children too.
Yeah.
It's the story of you two, isn't it? Yeah. And I know one of the things that you said to me when we spoke, you said you want to start remembering Rob before the illness again. Have you achieved that yet? Because I think when you've been a carer for somebody, you've looked after someone who's been poorly for a long time, it's quite hard to remember what life was like before. Have you got to that stage now, Lindsey?
Yeah, I think I'm getting there. It is difficult, and there'll be certain times, you'll have had a bad day, or you get some news and you think, I'll just message Rob and text Rob and tell him this, and then the realization that he's not there anymore and you can't share that. Or if you just want advice on what would you do, Rob, in this situation, that's the hard part for me, knowing that he's not going to be here in the future, and you've just not got that person to bounce off, just to kind of share ideas or get their opinion, get their take on things. And that's probably what I miss most is not having Rob around, just to sound ideas and to, how would you do this? Is the hard part for me. But yeah, we're just navigating, life now as a family of 4, and determined to try and make Rob proud, and like he made us proud, and continue to live life to its fullest.
I'm sure you will.
I think he will be incredibly proud, and I think he'd be very proud of the way you speak and everything that you said today, Lindsey. It's been absolutely lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck with everything that we'll hope by the time this goes out, the centre may be open by then, but good luck with that and the 3-legged challenge.
Thank you so much.
Wish you all the best with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, lots of love. And that's just about it from us again, from another episode of Yorkshire Talks.
Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we will see you next time on Yorkshire Talks.
We will indeed. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.